Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Hey, Miguel back here on the Lights Out podcast, and I'm joined by the MMA detective, Mike Davis, with Chris Lytle waiting in the wings, and that means we've got another deep dive in the works here. Mike, we're going down, into the archives of the history books here, into the vaults here. What are we doing? Who we got? Someone special.
Well, we've got our second first weight world champion, and Pat Miletich. Pat Miletich won a 170-pound title. The inaugural title, it was called lightweight initially, and then it later right-sided itself and became the 170-pound welterweight title.
Yeah, I'm excited about Pat. Like I saw a lot of those early UFCs live with him, and I knew him from back then and stuff. So I expect a good interview. I mean, the Pat I know has always been a pro. So, and I think that's what we'll get here. I think he'll have some fun stories because he's been around the world and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, that his professional antennas will come back up as soon as he realizes he's in a deep dive.
Right. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take it all the way up to his title fight against Mikey Burnett. We're also then going to transition to conversation about his gym. Mark Coleman's inevitably going to come up. Lee Murray's going to come up. We're really going to concentrate on the early days of MMA. So Pat is obviously a legend in the sport, and he's certainly somebody that we have got to get. And today, we've made that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, April 8th, I am at Bourbon Street in the south side of Chicago, 115 Bourbon Street. Ignite FC is doing a cage fight there. I am hosting it April 16th, whatever that Saturday is. I'm in Orlando, Florida, Abu Dhabi Jiu-Jitsu Pro, registered through Smooth Comp. Ladies and gentlemen, please help this podcast grow. Like, share, and subscribe. And if you're into gambling, betdsi.eu. If you use the promo code Lights Out, we get a little bit kickback on it. You get 50% of your cash deposit up to $1,000. And we've actually had a couple people do that, and it's really nice. Really nice to see a little bit of change come in once a month for the podcast. So, Miguel, I'm done with my plugs.
And that means we're just getting started with Pat Miletich, Chris Lytle bringing him in here. Hey, Miguel here for the Lights Out podcast. I have Mike Davis with me, and we already have the guest spot filled. Chris Lytle will be joining us here as the interview continues, but we're going to warm up with the first UFC lightweight champion, and that's Pat Miletich. We're in historic territory, folks. Mike, take it away.
Absolutely. So, Pat, you obviously are at the beginnings of mixed martial arts. Like you're, the godfather of MMA here in the Midwest. And I'm not trying to age you, but, without you, I don't think the Midwest would get its proper spotlight as it does today. So,
well, it's nice of you, Mike, but I mean, I think I think right place, right time, and all the different things that happened in my life, happen for a reason, right? And if you're, I guess, paying attention to messages being sent your way, you kind of run with it, and I was lucky, right place, right time, and had things happen the way they did. It's hard to explain how it all went down, but I ended up, inside of a cage fighting other men.
Well, it started in 1995, Battle of the Masters. Is that your actual first fight, or do you have something prior to that?
Well, I mean, first, I guess, no holds barred, whatever, inside of a ring. Yeah. I fought pro kickboxing as well, and some amateur kickboxing, and then actually got my start in the art door tough man contests. I fought, I think, 3 or 4 tough man contests, and then started fighting kickboxing, pro kickboxing, K1 rules kickboxing, and then started fighting mixed martial arts, no holds barred.
Well, so outdoor, you had mentioned tough man competitions. Outdoor was kind of like a throwback to the traveling circus, fist fight, sideshows that would travel throughout the entire world. And outdoor brought that to like a lot of, it was never like a big city. It was always a small city, so they kind of stayed outside of the political radar. But how did you do in those?
The first one I got into, I really didn't have really any training, anything like that. Besides, I had boxed many years ago. Had a tough fight with he won the tournament, lost a decision, whatever, to a guy up in Dubuque, Iowa, I think it was, and then fought the next one that I got into, Mark Christensen, and then another guy. I'm trying to remember the other guy's name, but both at one time had won World Tough Man Championships. Christensen, and then dang it, I forget the other one's name. I got 8 million boxing matches, whatever, and then he and I had a battle for first place, and I lost 2 points because I kneed him in the face twice. I basically, it was boxing, but because I don't know, just instinct, grabbed him by the back of his head and blasted him in the face with knees, and so I lost points on that and then lost that match, and eventually
did the crowd go nuts?
It was, he was from Illinois. He was a big name in Illinois, and he was national Golden Glove boxing champion actually at one time, and then fought quite a few pro boxing matches. And he really shouldn't have been in the Tough Man for as much experience as he had at the time. And so it was the Illinois versus Iowa stuff, which is always heated.
Yeah. Chris is waiting, Miguel. All right. So Battle of the Masters, the Chicago tournament with an 8-man bracket. The promoter was Tom Latuli. How do you enter into that tournament with Tom Latuli's tournament?
So Joe Goitia called me up. He had refereed some of my kickboxing matches in Chicago, and called me up at the gym that I was running here in the Quad Cities for Nick Tarpon at the time, karate kickboxing gym. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, there's one spot left open in an 8-man, no holds barred tournament, no weight divisions, no time limits, no rules. And I think I can get you in it. And it's $5,000 winner take all." And at the time, I really needed the money. I was trying to pay bills for my mom, and had left college, was working 3 jobs. And I said, "If you can get me in it, let's do it." And he got me in there.
So Tom Latui, kind of a famed early Chicago promoter, passed from a heart attack. Your first opponent is probably the number 1 seed. And I'm probably thinking maybe that's why that spot was open. I don't think there would have been a waiting list to get there. And that's Yasunori Matsumoto, right from Japan.
Yeah, and he was, I really didn't know a lot about him. I didn't know anything about anybody back then. You heard their names and all that sort of stuff. There's no scouting reports. There's no film to watch, anything like that. So I don't, they just told me he's a judo champion and a bare knuckle Shidokan champion from Japan. And that's the deal. Okay, I'm a wrestler and a kickboxer. Let's do this. I'm pretty decent at jiu-jitsu by then. So let's do it. But I tell you what, as tough as he was, because that was my first MMA fight, to get him in an armbar pretty early on in the fight and dislocate his elbow, have him get out of it, and then try and choke me for a couple of minutes with the arm that I dislocated, that brings things, in your first fight, you go, okay, this is pretty real. I just snapped that guy's elbow and he's trying to choke me with that arm. This guy's hardcore. So ended up choking him, finishing him with a gi choke, actually. But it's a little dose of reality when it's your first fight, and it gets that serious that early.
Yeah. So go ahead, Miguel.
I don't want to get off the subject here of your first fight, but I had heard that there weren't too many people in the streets of Bettendorf that got by you either.
You know, what's funny is people have asked me that before and said, you know, what's it like, you know, when I was the UFC champ, they're like, what's it like to be the, you know, one of the toughest guys on the planet? I go, I'm about 30th toughest dude in my town. Yeah, people don't realize how many badass wrestlers and wrestler boxers and guys like that. The Pansloff brothers, Pachotti, Brian McCracken, who was a two-time All-American, three-time All-American heavyweight wrestler for the University of Illinois, and then was a SEAL team squad commander. You know, he 6'4", walked around at, you know, 245, and legit badass. You know, those. So it's, you know, I might be the UFC champ at the time, but I'm sitting there going, I can't kick their ass. I just know, I know these guys. I've been around them. I just know how scary they are.
You know, isn't it crazy how California, New York, Chicago, when we're talking about badass cities, Davenport and Bettendorf, they're not on the end of anybody's tongue. But, you know, you really put a staple of like where you came from and what it's like to be from there.
Like I said, man, it's a tough river town, both Illinois and Iowa, both sides of the river, you know, and Rock Island and Moline, Illinois, and then Davenport and Bettendorf, Iowa, and, you know, all the surrounding area. It's just blue collar, river town, farming communities as well. It was a combination of just really, really hardworking, very tough people. And that's
blue collar people. Yep.
I mean, I grew up in a wrestling room, you know, we were always in the top 3 in the state of Iowa, which is obviously hard to do. And, you know, your toughest matches generally were, you know, the guys in the wrestling room. You know, we're all beating the shit out of each other our entire lives from when I started wrestling, kindergarten, first grade. So you just get used to it, and that's the level of guys you're dealing with your whole life.
Oh, wow. So you get through Matsumoto you choked him out 7 minutes, 40 seconds. He was the number 1 seed. You go on to fight Angelo Rivera from Combat Doe. How like, was that difficult for you coming into a second fight, having such a grueling battle with Yasunori?
Well, I think Rivera might have been a alternate for a gentleman by the name of, it was Michael Brown, I think was his name. He was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and Marcel Lovrich, and he fought they were on the other bracket, but the fight lasted for, I'm guessing, 40 minutes. And Marcel Lovrich headbutted that guy. I think it was, somebody counted 52 times square in the face. And then Michael Brown ended up winning the match with a triangle choke. So everybody was in the same locker room, but they were running cold water on him, and he was laying kind of against the wall while they were running cold shower water on him to try and revive him for the next fight for me. And then I watched him slide down the wall into a heap. And so he was toast. So then they brought in Angelo Rivera to fight me from Bob Shermer's gym. So it was a pretty easy fight. Took him down, and then back then you could use the 12 to 6 elbows. So I took his back, and then I flattened him out, and then I used 12 to 6 elbows on the back of his head, and he tapped out pretty quick after that.
So
pretty smart move.
Yeah. Wait, Chris. So check this out. The guy receiving 52 headbutts. What did he walk away with pay wise?
Zero.
I want to renegotiate the contract next time, you know?
I think I would have brought my friends in with that negotiation, not just myself. Well, you wind up in the finals against Kevin Mariano, and it's his second fight in the tournament. You've obviously had 3, so I think people were dropping off left and right.
Yeah, there was a couple of injuries, and you know, Kevin Marino. Yeah, Kevin Marino was his name, and he was Keith Hackney's training partner. And so I was at that age. I had a chip on my shoulder. Keith Hackney, been in the UFC, and of course I'm sitting there going, all right, I'm going to beat the shit out of, because Keith's actually a really nice guy, but he was kind of cocky, that Chicago attitude, tough guy attitude, type thing.
Those pricks.
And so
It's true.
Sorry,
guy.
Mike, not you.
Okay.
And me being from small town Iowa and stuff, and so I just instantly had a chip on my shoulder for him. So I just decided I'm gonna just beat the living hell out of his training partner, just because I didn't like how Hackney was carrying himself, right? So, and Marino was a strong guy, just wasn't very good at wrestling, and I found it odd when I was mounted on top of him. I think I was hitting him with headbutts and elbows and stuff, and they kept yelling and it's on the film. It's on YouTube, actually. You can hear Hackney going, "Eagle claw, Kevin, eagle claw, eagle claw." I'm going, what the fuck is an eagle claw?
What's coming? Yeah, what's coming?
It's nothing.
It's a deadly tickle move, maybe.
Tickle move.
I think it's grab the clavicle or something.
As long as it's not the crotch. I mean, Hackney was proven to be capable of that. So I mean, who knows?
It was legal back then.
It was legal. It was legal.
Pat, real quick. You were one of the few individuals we've had. Well, not that we've had, that people would know that was around from the era where everything was legal, like we're talking about, more Vale Tudo style headbutts. 12 to 6 elbows, everything. And then you were there as the sport evolved into the rules. Now, what in your opinion, what do you like better to do, and what do you like better as far as coaching or whatever? Do you have a preference? Do you like more rules? Do you like less rules? What do you think is more?
Well, you've had a lot of different fights and a lot of different styles as well, right? So you understand. Oh, yeah. You just deal with the rules you're given. If you and I were, to square off with a couple of guys in an alley, we're going to do whatever it takes to win, right?
Exactly.
Under those rules, which are no rules, we're going to do what we have to do. And so you just learn to fight under the rules you're given, and you just, think it through and understand, how to get the best of a guy and how to outthink a guy, I guess, under the rules. I never had a problem with, the no rules stuff, because that's what you would train for, and you were prepared for it, and you defended against it. I never, in my entire career, never got hit with a headbutt. Never got hit with a solid elbow. I think in my entire career, maybe caught a couple knees, but for the most part, I never really. And I learned early on, don't chew on knees and elbows, definitely. But but you know what I'm talking about. You fought under so many different types of rules and stuff. It's just it's all fun. It's all fun.
I always find it funny when people will be like, "Man, you were doing a boxing match or something. Like, were you afraid you were going to take him down?" I'm like, "No, you just know the rules, and I'm not stupid. I'm not just reacting out there. I know what I'm doing. I've trained a lot of each. It's not that hard." And it was neat time back in the 90s when you'd show up at a fight and you'd be like, "Okay, what are the rules?" And they're kind of talking, no headbutts. You can't leave the head. Like, just kind of figured out. You could argue with them. Well, no, we got to do this. Okay. It was just, you just found out the rules and you applied them. You know what I mean? It's not that hard.
Right. Yeah.
So, Pat, what kind of pressure were you under on January 20th, 1996, fighting in a Quad Cities Ultimate? Now you're in front of your home crowd, and you've got quite a reputation in your city at this time.
Well, my reputation in the Quad Cities was long before I started professional fighting.
You definitely made the newspaper, on more than one occasion.
Yeah. Well, it was, it was cool because, the Mark was what it was called back then. It was pretty much sold out. I think it was 10,000 people, so it was pretty amazing. And the guy that I was supposed to fight first round disappeared after the weigh-ins or whatever. He kind of disappeared out the back door, and so they found a guy to replace him, which I felt horrible for. And the guy stepped in and
Ed McLennan.
It was bad. And then Ed McLennan. It was pretty sad. And then I'm trying to think, who did I fight after that?
Rick Ravenson.
Yeah. So Rick, was a prison guard at the Pontiac prison in Illinois over there, which was a max security. And he had Hellraiser tattooed on his back and a bone through his nose and all kinds of crazy stuff. He was former special forces, I believe. And Rick ended up training with me for quite a few years after he and I fought. And we had fought in one of the Battle of the Masters and then in the Quad City Ultimate. And then Rick moved to Iowa and started training with us full time. But Rick didn't have the wrestling, and that was his downfall. And, was able to finish him pretty quick as well.
Yeah.
My girlfriend at the time sang the national anthem, all the fighters. Monty liked to do back then the parade of athletes, like the Tough Man contest. We all got in the cage at the same time. My girlfriend gets in there and starts singing the national anthem. And somebody in the crowd, because she had a great voice, goes, "You go, Pat. You go," because like saying, yeah, that's my girlfriend singing the national anthem. Yeah, you go, Pat. And she stopped singing the national anthem and turned to where it came from and said, "That's extremely disrespectful." And the crowd's like, "What's up? What's up?" And so she started over from the beginning and sang it. I was just sitting there going, Can we just get through this bit? Can we just get through this? It was awful.
So, what kind of money did you get paid for your second tournament? With Monty said that you sold the place out.
Oh, Monty kept it all. Trust me. I didn't make that much. Monty made a pretty good amount of money.
So I have a question here
for you.
Yeah, I have a question here, and what is training like for you at this point? How many guys do you have, and where are you training? And are you kind of doing a little bit of everything? Or are you just, how's training going?
I'm training down at Pena's boxing gym quite a bit for my hands, and those incredible boxers down there. They had the best amateur boxing team in the country at the time, and wow. Michael None and Antoine Eccles and a bunch of other guys came out of there. Wow. And then I would go up to the University of Iowa and wrestle up there during the summers, a lot with the Hawk Club guys. And then, of course, I rented a racquetball court, and we put mats on the floor and the walls and just turned it into a battle box. And there was quite a few tough guys. Mark Hansen, who was, a Davenport police officer, a former All-American football player for Northern Iowa, and quite a few other really, really tough guys. That we had in the room. It was growing pretty quick. Jeremy Horn and some other guys were coming not long after that, I think, actually.
Yeah, you mentioned that somewhere along the line that you already had some jiu-jitsu. Where did that come from?
An 11 tape set, and Mark Hansen and I we did 4 hours a day because he worked second shift. And so we would do one technique for 1 hour, drill it over and over and over, just back and forth, 10 times, back and forth for an hour. Then the next technique, and we'd do 4 techniques a morning, and then we'd move on to the next 4 techniques. And we did that until we went through the entire 11 tape series. And we had actually, of course, it would have been great to have a black belt in jiu-jitsu there, helping us with details and stuff. But we were really invested in it, and we wanted to get through that and have really solid fundamentals by the time we got through with it. And I think, by the time we did, it wasn't, I'm trying to remember where in the sequence. I went to Florida to train with Sergio Monteiro. He was kind of the measuring stick for what was the name of it? Extreme Super Fights or whatever the heck it was. Dr. John Keating and those guys had.
Okay.
So I was supposed to go to Tampa and roll with him, and he was going to tell them whether I was good enough to be in. And we rolled for, good 45 minutes, and he was doing things that I didn't understand. I'd never seen before, but he couldn't catch me in a submission. He couldn't finish me. And I went for some, stuff on him as well. And he asked me, he goes, "Where the hell who taught you your jiu-jitsu?" And I said, "Videotapes." And he's like, "Holy shit. Okay." So we remember fundamentals.
Do you remember what series that was?
It was a Henzo Gracie, dude.
Did you go to one of his seminars back in the day?
Yeah, I went to a seminar of his because I'd watched I think the first or second or both. I watched the first one, saw Hoist win, and I went, man, something's fishy with this stuff. This jujitsu. I'd done some judo and stuff, but I was like, I need to go to this seminar and see this firsthand and see what this shit's all about. And so I watched Henzo tap a two-time All-American from Purdue University, a wrestler. And when I watched him move on the ground, up close and personal, I went, yeah, this shit's for real. I want to get good at this. This is legit stuff. Because I figured, spend a lifetime of wrestling and then learn the jujitsu with it. It's going to make you pretty decent.
So
lucky thing, Mark Hansen's a little guy too, just, so that you guys, he doesn't hurt you in training.
Mark used to kick me with low kicks in the thigh, and my legs would go straight up in the air, and I'd land on my head on a wood floor when we used to spar. We sparred on a wood floor. We didn't spar on mats and stuff.
Oh, that's smart, Pat. I mean, you were always
Absolutely
very advanced, in your training.
For those listening who don't know, Hansen probably 300 pounds when he was training with you. He probably 280, 300. I mean, I'm just kidding around about the size.
Yeah, he was benching 550 and squatting massive amounts of weight and all that stuff. He's a powerful dude. He really was. And he was a
training partner.
He was a great fighter.
The other thing I remember about Mark, just to chirp on him a little bit, because I'm a fan, is you're talking about 280, but a guy that I don't want to say Brock Lesnar, but he could move. He wasn't just a 280 slow guy. Right, This guy was like an athlete, like a real athlete. Like he was impressive.
Yeah, he was all decade. He was all decade for Northern Iowa's conference. As a lineman, the Pittsburgh Steelers wanted him, and they would have taken him early in the draft, but they found out that he had destroyed his ankle during his senior season, and so he ended up becoming a police officer.
So we had Mark Schultz on, Olympian, and he said, all you really want to do, if you want to learn jiu-jitsu, all you have to do is learn the rules of wrestling of moves you're not supposed to do. He's like, that's jiu-jitsu.
It is in a way, but it was when I first started learning jiu-jitsu, I would look at a move, a technique, and go, because of the rules of wrestling, it didn't cross your mind to do a lot of these things. And then when you saw it, you'd go, why wouldn't I think of that? It's so odd. And for a wrestler, a guy that, wrestled my whole life, jiu-jitsu was like a brand new, like just a whole rebirth. And you go, you're like a kid in a candy store. You go, this shit's amazing. This is incredible. It's mind blowing, right?
Wow. So just kind of, so people understand, if we can kind of frame it properly, Pat is going to fight in his third event, February 10th, 1996. So he's got 3 events and he's got 8 fights by the end of the event. All you're doing is tournaments. You beat Rick Ravison, Bob Golson, and then you wind up in the finals. It's Battle of the Masters with K1 champion that moved to Chicago with Andrei Arlovsky, named Andrei Dudko.
Andrei Dudko, yeah.
That dude's a savage.
Well, he was big, I can tell you that. He was very. He looked exactly like Ivan Drago. He really did.
And he would bend heavy bags, kicking them. Like he would literally bend giant heavy bags. I've seen him work out.
Yeah, no, he was very, very good striker, very big guy. I don't know, 6'4" or whatever, probably 240, something like that. But for, luckily for me, I found the one Russian that couldn't wrestle worth a shit.
That's good.
Because I've wrestled with guys from, that part of the world, and there's no matter what, if you fight somebody from one of the stands or Russia or whatever, you just know that you're going to be in an absolute war. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And he had mangled the first 2 guys in the tournament pretty badly. And so I knew that I just didn't want to stand up. He was just too big. It was just too big to get punched and kicked by for a very long period of time. It's not something I wanted to do. So I was able to get a double leg and dumped him. And I hit him with some headbutts, some elbows, and eventually hit him with a I can't remember the name of the choke. It's where you go around the back of the neck when they're on their back. So you're face to face with them. And then you snake the choke in. And I called it a snake choke and finished him with that, which, you know, God, I was just thinking, I just try and hold this big bastard down and get this choke to work type thing, because he was a big guy. But by the end of so I was terrified of him in the beginning of the night, because we saw him walk into the locker room. And when he walked past Mark Andersen and I, when we were sitting down, Mark looked at me and I looked at him, and we said at the same time, you know, holy shit, like this guy. And so it was a huge vote of confidence for Mark to say the same thing I was saying, with his eyes huge, and Mark's a giant guy. And but as the fights went on, you know, I was building confidence. So by the end of the night, before he and I went out, we're in the same locker room. I was yelling at him that I was gonna fucking destroy him. I was screaming at him. Like, so I was jacked up. So it was, yeah, I needed the money more than he did. I knew that. So
it's awesome. I love it.
It's like these stories, they don't exist anymore. It's incredible stuff. And Yasunori Matsumoto goes on a 5-fight win streak, including wins over Dennis Reed and Mark Andersen. And you fight him May 11th, 1996 at the Quad Cities Ultimate Zoo in a rematch.
How did he beat Hansen, though? Wait, whoa.
Exactly.
Hansen beat the living shit out of Matsumoto for quite a while, and then gassed. He ran out of gas, and Matsumoto mounted him and just kept pounding away on him until the referee pulled Matsumoto off. But Mark gave him, I mean, Marcel Lovrich, when Matsumoto and Marcel Lovrich fought in one of the Battle of the Masters. I think it was the third one. Lovrich beat the shit out of him, and Marcel Lovrich gassed out, and Matsumoto came back. And that was Matsumoto's style. He'd just keep trucking along, taking their abuse, and just eventually wear people down, you know. And he almost did it to me in our second fight, actually, because I beat on him, and the referee had stepped in to stop the fight, to have the doctor look at him, and Matsumoto was cut over and under both eyes. I'd broken his nose, his lip was all gashed up, and one of his ears was bleeding, and my hands were smoked. My hands were toast. They weren't broken, they were just swollen up really bad. Mm-hmm. And the doctor said, he wants to continue, let it go. So we started going at it again, and I started hitting him with freaking ridge hands. I blasted him with ridge hands, trying to hit him on the neck and knock him out. And then he checked one of my low kicks, almost ruined my leg. He checked a kick. Matsumoto held the world record, I think, at one time or something, for breaking like 10, 15 baseball bats with one kick or something like that. So he had huge calf muscles. And so he checked one of my kicks, trashed my leg. And then I think it was the third time the referee stopped the fight to have the doctor come in. I was taking my gloves off, and had the doctor allowed it to continue, I was done. My hands looked like balloons. I was just, I couldn't use my hands anymore. So luckily the referee or the doctor stopped the fight at that point.
So in essence, you were beating him with your extremities, not even fists.
Dude, you have no idea. You have no idea how tough that guy was. He was insane. And Dave Strasser, who fought in the UFC, who eventually came down to train with me, he was training under Matsumoto when I fought him the first time and broke Matsumoto's arm when I dislocated his elbow and tore all the tendons and stuff in it. He said that Matsumoto was at the gym the next day teaching, and he said his Matsumoto's hand was black from the blood in the elbow coming all the way down into his hand, and his hand was all swollen up, and he goes, his hand was jet black from the blood.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, just being in Japan and training with those guys, I just know, I don't think they were they were just tough. You know what I mean? Those guys, I don't know if it's the honor code that they have or whatever it is, but you're not out working them really. They're just tough. I don't think they go as hard, but they're just mentally tough, and they'll take it, man. Like you said, that a lot of time I feel like their game plan is just to pull a Rocky and take a beating and come back and gas you out. Those guys are just a different mindset over there, I believe.
They are, and well, you just think about it in a different time, a different setting. They'd be flying their planes into our ships.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, just a different mindset.
Yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
You mentioned a friend of mine, so we'll go down this path here a little bit. Dave Strasser. I knew he had gone to train with you. And is there an interesting story as to why you had to throw him out of the gym? Was there, because I've heard a story.
I don't know. Which story are you talking? Give me a generalization here.
That you asked him to leave the gym. I think you had like a family that you were taking through the gym and he was wrestling with somebody, doing something kind of weird. I don't know. What do you remember?
Maybe only with a cup on.
I never kicked him out of the gym. I think he left on his own to go back and start his own gym up in Wisconsin or whatever, was the deal. But Dave would do some interesting things, like when Jeremy Horn won. God, I'm trying to remember, out in California, he won a belt out there. He beat Dave Marsh. What was Marsh?
John Marsh.
Yeah, so he beat John Marsh, won the belt, and then Jeremy's sleeping. And all of a sudden, Jeremy hears his name being called in their hotel room. And so he wakes up and he goes, "There's Dave Strasser, totally naked with my belt on, going, 'See anything you like, Jeremy?'" Of course, Dave was just a jokester like that. That's what he'd do. And so yeah,
completely sober.
Totally sober. Yeah. He had a very unique sense of humor. He was a funny dude. He really was.
It sounds like you still like him. That's not the case with everybody. Like he pissed some people off.
I always got along with him. He got mad at me one time when he was fighting a guy from Bob Shermer's gym in a rematch. They had a draw previously, and Dave was training for a fight with him again. Real tough guy from Shermer's gym. And Dave was in his last 5-minute drills for endurance. We do 25 minutes of endurance drills, 5-minute rounds. And he was doing neon stomach on the bag, and I was pushing the pace. And it was, you have to move 3 punches and move, run around the head or hop across, one or the other. And it was just constant movement. And it's exhausting drill. And I was talking to him the whole time, motivating him, saying, it's not going to be a draw this time. You're going to run him out of gas. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And finally, he just broke and started crying. And he goes, "Just shut the fuck up." And he lost it. He lost it on me. But no, I always got along with him.
Miguel, is that you?
Yeah. Yeah, my dogs are barking here. So
You're fine.
Okay. So after that, I mean, you're kind of becoming a Midwest legend. You end up fighting Matt Andersen, Jeremy Horn's half brother, that is a future UFC veteran. Are you guys trained together at this point?
No. I think I don't think I had trained. I'm trying to think, to be honest with you, in the timeline of things, whether Jeremy was training with me at the time or I don't think so. I think Jeremy had made one trip down for a weekend or something and then gone back or whatever. But no, I don't think Jeremy was full time with us yet.
Okay. That was July 26, 1996, Gladiators. You knock Jeremy Horn's half brother out at 5:21. And if we're going to fast forward a little bit, you're also November 23rd, 1996. You fought a 15-0 Earl Loucks at Extreme Challenge 1.
Oh, Earl Loucks, yeah.
Yeah. You're taking as hard of fights that you can find. Like around this time, it was, a lot of padding of records. It seemed like you went out of your way to avoid that.
Back then, I don't think anybody was necessarily padding their records. You just fought who you could. You know what I mean? So, and Earl was very good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And I ended up catching him with a key lock. He trained with Ken Gabrielson, who was the first American who got a black belt under Kenny Gracie. And So I caught Earl in 3 key locks, and I kept missing them because I wasn't doing the thumb down on the wrist. I was doing this, and he would fish out of the damn thing, and then I'd have to battle back to position and finally caught him. And when I caught it, where his arm was like this next to his head, I had to put his hand. I had to spin his arm all the way around. He was a really flexible guy, very good jiu-jitsu guy for him to finally tap. But then I ended up later on, not to fast forward too much, but I went out to Ken Gabrielson's gym to actually train with those guys. And Earl's like, he's fucking good on the ground, very good. Like if I would have rolled with Earl before we fought, I would have went, there's no way I can beat this guy. He was slick without punches and stuff on the ground. He was super, super slick.
But it's always amazing how that changes things. How good at jiu-jitsu guys, you start throwing some elbows or whatever, that changes a full game right there. So you're a better fighter. He might have been a really good grappler, but this isn't grappling. This is a fight. You know what I mean? Well,
and you know, Chris, that some people are adverse to that self-preservation thing kicks in, right? And there's a lot to be said for people that, especially at that point in my career where self-preservation it didn't exist because there was no other way. But I was going to win no matter what it took, and just willing to walk through anything to get there. So that's the Midwest work ethic plus getting my ass kicked in Iowa wrestling rooms my whole life, all that sort of stuff. We're just I guess raised in a way that I'm not worried about my ability to go surfing the next weekend and hang out with the girls at the beach.
It's hard nosed, man. And I'm not saying this was that guy, but just as well as I do, how many guys, even in the wrestling room or anything like that, or in the gym, who were just killers in the gym or killers in the wrestling room, and all of a sudden they go out there and they get beat by an average guy. You're like, I don't get it. They're gym fighters or club fighters. I don't know what, but there's some kind of weird psychology. Some really talented guys can't get over that hump.
Subconscious programming, right? And
absolutely.
When they get out in front of people, they start having the negative self-talk, I think, right?
Absolutely. That's the toughest thing to overcome, I think, for some people, but I mean, some people never can do it.
Right.
So, Pat, you get your first airplane ride to a fight January 7th, 1997. TJ Thompson is going by Tommy Dakota at this time. And you fight in Super Brawl. I mean, which arguably was a top 5 probably top 3 organization in the entire world at this time. Did the jet lag affect you at all?
Oh, you have no idea what happened at that. Oh my God. Have you ever heard the story about that?
No, it's Jason Nicholson is the guy. I don't think he made weight. And
no,
he's from 808 Fight Factory.
I think it was I think we had to weigh 198 or less.
I don't think he weighed. I think he weighed like 220.
He did. He weighed 218.
Yeah.
And so TJ was lifting up on his fists behind him, so that he could make weight. they stacked the deck against me, right? So, and Jason Nicholson was a really good wrestler from Oklahoma and the #1 ranked cruiserweight contender in the world.
Well, here. Let me interject. Chris Lytle, one of his guys that he fought as a boxer was one of your favorites, Vasily Girov.
Oh, wow.
So to even qualify to fight Vasily Girov tells you that the guy was probably really talented in boxing. Yeah.
No.
Miguel, we can't hear you.
I was just going to say, Jason Nicholson was one of those guys too. Everything that he's saying is true, but he did it with toughness first. It seemed like this guy was just the kind of guy that you could take a hammer to.
I did.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So no, I took him down, I don't know, 12 times during the fight. He was too big to hold down. He'd just stand up with me on his back. I just over and over. And then I was hitting him with 12 to 6 elbows on the back of the head, split his head wide open. I could see his skull. Blood's gushing out all over both of us. We're completely red. We're soaked from head to toe, just glistening in blood. And he's laughing at me every time I'm hitting him with elbows and stuff and yelling. On the video, you can see him, basically saying, you're a pussy. Come on, dude. And I had spent 2 nights in a row not sleeping at all. So Monty snored so badly that I stayed awake all night.
Oh.
I even went into the bathroom, closed the door, took a comforter in there, some pillows, put pillows over my head, in the tub. I could still hear him snoring. That's how bad it was. So I was losing my mind. And then we get in the elevator to go downstairs when the driver came for us to take us to Blaisdell Arena. And I literally fell asleep leaning against the hotel, against the elevator. I fell asleep for a second. And so by the time that fight ended, I was hallucinating. He hit me one time and it was a hard punch, but it didn't hurt me. And so when I was leaving the ring, because it was a tournament, that was a 4-man tournament. And I was supposed to fight Ray Brada Cooper Sr. in the championship.
Super tough.
Yeah, he was a very talented guy. So I'm leaving and I'm walking toward the locker room and people are grabbing my arms and I'm yanking my arms away. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And they're going, they're yelling at me about something. And I'm walking toward the locker room. And finally, I think it was a Honolulu police officer, a big guy, stood in front of me and he goes, son, the locker room is behind you. Go that way. And I remember turning around and going back the other way, getting into the locker room and I'm completely out of it, hallucinating, dehydrated. And so they're like, we got to put IVs in him. So I was out of the tournament after that.
Oh.
Brada Cooper, Jason Nicholson stepped in for the other, I can't remember. No, he stepped in, he replaced me and he goes, fuck it, I'll do it. And he just went out and laid down for him just to get the extra money or whatever. But that was a tough fight. That was probably my toughest fight.
How was the jet lag? Was that also difficult in with the time difference?
I'm sure it, it made a difference, as you get into your career and you fight more and you get more experience with it and all that sort of stuff you learn. But jet lag didn't mean shit compared to Monty snoring for 2 nights in a row.
Did you looking back, do you wish you'd have been like, dude, Monty, you got to get your own room. This isn't going to work. I got to get some sleep.
Well, TJ wouldn't do it. He was so cheap. He wouldn't do it.
What'd you get paid for that?
Fuck. I don't know. I have no clue. I have no clue.
Isn't that great?
Hey, did you have fun in
Nothing.
Hawaii? Because that sometimes, plays into it too. I mean, was that a little bit of it? And why would they bring Nicholson in from Oklahoma for you?
Well, Monty begged and begged and begged to get me into that whole deal. TJ finally said, yeah, and then decided he was going to stack the deck against me with a guy that was, 20 pounds overweight, weighed almost 220. But more than anything else, I enjoyed being in Hawaii at the time for a little bit, but then I got island fever. I had to get off the island because I grew up in the center of friggin' the United States. So you can drive for days and just keep driving. Well, I'm on an island and realizing, shit, it's like a postage stamp in the middle of the ocean. Kind of freaked me out, to be honest with you. So I wanted to get back home. It wasn't until we all started, myself and the guys from my camp, when we would go there for fights, we would surf all week long. And once it clicks in your brain of that surf mentality, then you never want to leave. Then we would surf all day long and then go to Duke's right there on Waikiki Beach and have an awesome dinner and, hang out there. And I got it then. It all clicked and I never wanted to leave then. I was like, I could sell everything I own and just surf and be a bum. Now I understand it. Grow my hair out. Just have a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it made perfect sense at that point.
I could box more,
Right.
So you're in the middle of a crazy run. You haven't even lost yet. You get Extreme Challenge 2, Paul Kimbrough. He's 6-0 from Florida. I mean, huge crowd pop. You win that one. You go on to Chad Cox, a boxer from Grand Island, Nebraska. You're at home again, Extreme Challenge 3. That was an interesting fight between you and Chad.
Chad Cox?
Yes. Do you remember the reason he tapped out?
Well, a tooth flew out or something.
It got stuck in the back of his throat, and while trying to swallow it and deal with the blood, he tapped out because he freaked out after you cracked him.
Yeah, I mounted him and hit him with an uppercut because he was trying to pull me close, and I hit him with an uppercut or something, I think, and his tooth went flying out somehow, and I thought he was just giving up for, like, he got paid to be a victim or something. But I don't know.
No, he was legitimately tough. No, he was definitely and Extreme Fighting 4, a very controversial bout, at least in terms of stoppage. March 28th, 1997. You go in against the evil genius known as Matt Hume.
Oh yeah. He was amazing. Still to this day, I think he's still one of the greatest technicians in mixed martial arts history, without a doubt. I mean, so that was the fight that I went out and trained at Ken Gabrielson's for. But in that fight, I threw him around like he didn't. Physically, he just wasn't strong. He was very agile, very quick, very smart, very technical. I mean, just super, super good. But I was ragdolling him, throwing him around for the most part. But I never, at any given time in the fight, felt like I was in control of the fight. There was just something about the way he felt when I was just like, this guy's different. There's something about this guy that's different. And right at the end of the first round, he hit me with a knee or two. I rolled. I knew it was the end of the round. I rolled back to pull guard just because I didn't want to get my face caved in. And I knew there was 10 seconds left in the round. The bell sounded. I went back to my corner. And that's when sport was really controversial back then. And there's a gap still to this day between the cartilage and the bone where my nose the cartilage had gotten separated. I got headbutted by a professional boxer that I was sparring with. And so the doctor felt that and said, no, got to stop it. Nose is broke or whatever, just because the sport was under so much scrutiny, right? But that was the fight that taught me that I was not world class by any means.
Really?
Yeah, I knew after that fight that I didn't know shit. I walked away from that going, that guy knows what the fuck he's doing.
Did you know of Hume much before that, how good he was and his credentials before that fight?
Yeah. I watched him and Eric Paulson fight in the fight before I fought Matt, and I knew how good Paulson was as well. And Hume beat Paulson in that fight, and so it's like, these guys are legit, man. These guys are good.
Okay. Now that was your first exposure to Perretti, John Perretti, as a matchmaker too. Do you remember the first time you met him? What was that like?
I just found him very, being from Iowa, just a Midwest guy and stuff. Perretti was a unique character amongst all the unique characters that in that sport at the time. That's for sure, right? I mean, he was a trip. He was a trip.
Now I've asked a couple of people, and everybody says the same thing. But did you ever get to roll with him?
We didn't really roll a whole lot. He kind of, at that time, I think in his career, because he was a great martial artist himself. He basically said, I'm not going to roll with you. You're too, back then when I was that strong, really good wrestler at the time or whatever. And he just said, I'm not going to roll with you. I have no, and I know how he felt, because I know how I feel now. If I was rolling with a 28, 27, 26-year-old guy or whatever, who's in the prime of his life, I'm like, I'm not going to roll with you. I have no desire to roll with you. So I know what he was saying, but he taught me some cool shit. Actually, he taught me a 3-finger choke from the side that I still remember to this day. It's a badass choke. It's sneaky, very sneaky choke.
Cool.
That's weird. Like, a lot of he always gets like mixed reviews on the people that we talk about him on here. Like Matt Sarah couldn't stand him.
Well, the thing is look, man, Perretti does not get the credit he deserves. He does not. A lot of the folks, when the UFC got taken over and all that, history got rewritten. We all know that. and all that sort of stuff. He was responsible for the, the weight divisions, the time, all the, a lot of the rules and stuff. And as far as the state of Iowa is concerned, which was, I think, even before New Jersey sanctioned the sport, the state of Iowa actually sanctioned it with the rules that Monty and I wrote for the sport, which predates, New Jersey.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, Perretti was definitely a groundbreaker. But like, to share a story with you, Chris Brennan said, I mean, he was in blue jeans warming up a fighter in the octagon, going over a leg lock or a heel hook, and Perretti says, "Hey, show me where you put your foot," and he popped it with jeans on. So it's like, that's an uncool move. But I guess, if you didn't experience that some people say, everybody says that Perretti's a wizard, that he was definitely a martial artist, but he's got that negative vibe sometimes.
Well, I think, some bitterness about not getting credit for a lot of the stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think there's some of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. The guy was a way ahead of his time, but like light years.
Well, those guys, like I was saying, Matt Hume and Eric Paulson, and a lot of those guys that were over in Japan competing and all that sort of stuff, and the judo type stuff, and those guys were submission, some amazing submission fighters, amazing.
I would even say Japan had higher end submission guys than the UFC at this point, particularly Pancrase.
Pancrase, and then when I was fighting Matt Hughes and I were on the same card in the UFC Japan, and I don't know if this is anywhere in the material that we're talking, but
No, go ahead.
the thing was that the night before, the UFC took all of us to the Shudo after we all made weight and had dinner and stuff like that. They took us to a Shudo event where was it God dang it.
Sakurai?
Carl Uno fought Rumina Sato. Some incredible Brazilians were fighting Japanese guys over there. And when I watched that event, I went, these guys are so much better, high level dudes than the UFC. Like, these guys are fucking legit, man. This is, and that's when Max Sakurai knocked out Frank Trigg.
I'm gonna guess that you probably saw like the Brazilians were like John Hawk and Pequeno, Nogueira. So wizards. Yeah,
I was just going, these guys are ridiculously good.
I think I was at that event too, Pat. I was actually there.
Miguel was jet setting. So you lose to Matt Hume, you get a bounce back fight against Chuck Kim, who was a pretty tough fighter out of Bakersfield, California. He definitely came to fight. You finish him with a rear naked choke at 10:49. And then you go in with the name Miguel just mentioned, Extreme Challenge 9 with Chris Brennan. And that is a hard fight. Like, you're not dodging anybody.
Yeah, no, and the thing was, Chris, we fought in, it was a light mist. It was, I think, what was the month we fought in?
It was August 30th, 1997. It was outdoors.
So it was like 95 degrees, and it was a mist, and we're fighting on a vinyl surface. So it's like an ice skating rink. You can't even stand up hardly. And every time I'd get him against the cage, he'd just take both hands and push off on the cage like this, and we'd go spinning like tops back out into the center, and just crazy shit like that. I hit him with a left leg body kick and broke his ribs and wrecked his liver and dropped him. But I just could not finish him, man. I could not finish him in that fight. And it was I don't know what the time limit was even on that. I don't remember there being rounds or not. I don't remember.
Well, I think it was like one round. I think it was either 20 or 30 minutes. Brennan readily admits that he lost the fight. He goes, it was a draw because there wasn't a finish. He's like, well, Miletich kicked my ass. Those are his words, not ours. And the crazy thing is, you guys were like using lineman football hand pads that are like taped to you.
Oh yeah.
Those are your gloves.
Yeah, the old Quans.
Oh yeah.
And do you remember the ring it was like a boxing ring with like a makeshift cage like Jimmy rigged around it. It looks so dangerous. Like
It was a dog.
like actual fencing, not
it was
like
a dog.
the
It was a
plastic
dog
coated.
kennel. It was a dog kennel.
Right.
It was a dog kennel.
It's appropriate in many ways. It's good.
It's just like
Mike, what you're saying, I remember so many times when you go in there would be a boxing ring and they'd put just 4 fences up around 4 cages. That was how they made a cage sometimes. Like it is what it is. There's a legitimate corner you could get trapped in. It was
Dude, yeah. And that's the same cage where Jeremy Horn, before he came to train with us, was fighting Nate Schroeder from my gym. Nate Schroeder is still a Davenport police officer. Nate was a lineman for Augustana College in Rock Island. Originally, he's from Chicago. So Nate's fighting him, and Nate was the toughest 5-minute guy in the world. He was the toughest guy on the planet for 5 minutes, but he gassed, right? So Jeremy Horn and he were fighting, and Jeremy's leg slid, like if this is the edge of the cage where the chain link is, Jeremy's leg went between the surface and the chain link and was way down here, and he was on his other knee inside the cage, trapped against the cage. And back then, knees to the head were legal, so Nate's got him against the cage, blasting him in the side of the head with knees over and over and over. And Jeremy survives all of that, eventually works his way out of that, and ends up beating Nate. And that was just one of their fights. They fought twice. Jeremy beat Nate another time. Nate beat the shit out of him again. And Jeremy somehow reversed Nate. Nate was starting to get tired. And no, Nate was still on top. And we were talking to Nate, and I said, Nate, I go, start punching, man, start punching. And Nate looks over at us and goes, I can't. And Jeremy looks at us. Jeremy looks at Nate and looks at us, and he's like, oh shit, he's done. Jeremy reversed him and won the fight.
Well, at this point, those fights I believe took place prior to this, but Jeremy Horn's in your corner. I believe he joined you at this point.
Yeah.
Nate Schroeder joined you too, didn't he?
Who?
Nate Schroeder. Nate.
Well, that's his fighter. Yeah, that's his fighter.
Yeah. So they ended up becoming training partners, obviously, and stuff like that. But yeah.
So what brought Jeremy over there, do you think? Was it just that he knew you guys were really tough and trained the right way? Or, I mean, what brought him out from being a competitor?
He lost to Mark Hansen in one of the second ultimate, I think. And so Jeremy decided to move to Iowa. You know, Jeremy lived with me for, I don't know, a month or so, 6 weeks. But I was just talking about it the other day. And Jeremy, like, if you've seen Jeremy's now could probably survive anything, like wilderness, you know, and he can catch a fish.
He's a shooter.
Yeah, he's an incredible shooter. He's an incredible shooter.
He's incredible armsman. Yeah, he loves guns. Yeah.
But when he came to me, he was a really naive young guy, right? He wasn't involved in sports previously, kind of a technique geek, you know, that sort of stuff, computer guy, whatever. Very cerebral. But Jeremy is at my house, and I'm making some patties of hamburgers. We're going to have hamburgers for lunch or dinner or whatever. And I go outside. I go, here's a box of matches. Go outside and light the grill. And he goes, and this isn't slamming Jeremy, just tells you how naive he was at the time. And he goes, okay. So he goes out the side door out on the driveway where the grill was. And I'm waiting. It's like 15, 20 minutes later. I'm like, why isn't Jeremy back in here? So I go outside, and Jeremy's standing there with the matches in his hand, staring at the grill. And I go, what are you doing? And he goes, I don't know how to light a grill. And I go, oh, fuck. All right. So I take the grate off, pour the charcoal in, squirt lighter fluid on it, throw a match on it, and light it. And he goes, what the fuck? Whoa. Okay. You know, he just
you may have ruined this guy's life. He was supposed to be in an office somewhere, and now he's like about 150 fights in, gym owner. You may have ruined his life, Pat.
He at the time, he didn't have a whole lot of worldly knowledge. You know what I mean? So it was just, I grew up cooking for myself. My mom was at work. I was cooking for myself. The elementary school that I went to at the time was my backyard connected to the schoolyard. So they let us go home for lunch. So I would walk home to an empty house. I had 2 German Shepherds at the time. I always spent my lunch with my German Shepherds. And then I would make myself lunch. I'd cook myself lunch at 5 years old and get done eating. I'd sit down in the living room on the couch with my plate of food. I'd watch Bozo Circus during lunch, and then I'd walk back across the schoolyard and go to school. That's just, I mean, that's how I grew up.
Jeremy combined it with that baby face too, so I get what you mean. It's a good story.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's never been cut open in a fight ever.
I don't get that.
Jeremy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall him ever getting cut open in a fight. And Jeremy and I used to bet each other who could go the longest without a black eye, because we prided ourselves on defense, right? And so that was something that we talked about often. And what I got him thinking, one of the few cuts I ever had was with Chris Brennan, I think, in maybe our second fight.
Yeah, that was November 15th, 1997, Extreme Challenge Trials, and it's your next fight. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I was cross sides on Chris. I had 103.5 temp for that fight. That's one thing I do remember is I had a horrible, I was sick as a dog. And so I would just get takedowns on Chris and just try and hit him and just try and get through the damn thing and win on points, whatever. But I was cross sides on him and he had reached around my arm and I had gotten a cut from we clashed heads. And he was trying to stick his finger in the cut to rip it open more. And so I grabbed his wrist and I pulled his hand away from my eye and I looked at him and I go, Chris, what the fuck are you doing? And he goes, gotta try, Pat, gotta try.
At least he told you.
Yeah, he was honest about it. So you win a split decision with Chris. I think Chris even mentioned in his interview with us that you were sick that night. And he said he was excited to do it. He's just like, I get another fight with Pat Miletich. He's the best in the world. It's, of course, why not? And you guys have a trilogy in the next time you fight, March 13th, 1998. You're at UFC 16 in a 4-man tournament. Your first opponent is a Olympic silver medalist in Townsend Saunders.
Right. Yeah.
Dude.
Well, growing up wrestling in Iowa and a lot of the guys that I wrestled against, and with and practiced with and stuff that weren't even, Olympians and stuff, but they were extremely good. I was thinking to myself, I can't imagine how strong and how good an Olympic silver medalist is. I was intimidated. I can tell you that. I remember turning around when we were both inside the cage. And I turned around and I put my head against the cage and I was taking deep breaths. And Mark Hansen, who was cornering me, goes, "You're fine, dude. You're fine. You're going to win this fight, whatever." But I was sitting there going, yeah, here I am, man. I finally made it to the UFC and fighting an Olympic silver medalist. This is a bit, it's one thing to be in the UFC, but your first fight is an Olympic silver medalist. You go, okay, I might have bit off more than I could chew here.
I mean, so in the head, your head had to be going, he's an Olympic silver medalist, but I'm a fighter. I've trained this, I've trained that, but it just kind of supersede that, the fact he was a silver medalist in the Olympics. I mean, it's kind of hard to get past that.
Well, and that was the thing is, for me, it was the wrestling thing because I grew up as a little kid going to Iowa wrestling meets. I idolized the Hawkeyes, Dan Gable, all this stuff. So a guy that's that good at wrestling to take second in the world, in the Olympics. Yeah, I was mentally a little intimidated, but in retrospect, Townsend actually would have never gotten me off my feet had I not thrown any kicks. That's the only time he could get a takedown on me.
Wow.
During the fight, you were talking to Vitor Belfort asking for advice.
What?
I don't remember talking to Vitor during the fight. I remember in Brazil being asked to go talk to Vitor before he fought Vanderlei Silva because he was scared to death and didn't want to come out. And I had to go give him a pep talk.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah, he was outside the cage and maybe you were speaking in his general direction, but the announcers during the fight Pat Miletich is asking Vitor Belfort for advice. You know, that's what they were saying.
No, I think I was just talking. I think I was talking to my cornerman or something.
Okay. So you go 15 minutes with Townsend Saunders, obviously no small feat, and you go into the second round of the tournament against Chris Brennan for a third time.
Yeah. Yeah. I was definitely ready for him that time, and I wanted to get him out of there. So he was tricky. He's a tough guy, but I trapped him against the cage, got an arm under his head and drove my shoulder into his carotid. And then because I had him against the cage, I didn't need to have the arm locked. When a guy has his arm over your head, you know, trying for a guillotine, and you get cross sides or a half guard and hit him with what they call a Von Flu nowadays. But so I just didn't even need the Von Flu to finish him because I had him pinned against the cage. One shoulder was cutting off one carotid, and then my shoulder was cutting off the other. And I just drove that shoulder into him, and I knew I had him stuck there. And so he ended up tapping.
Pat, at this point, he goes 15 minutes with the silver medalist. Chris Brennan is no joke. Like, he's one of the top 10 in the world at this point. You go 9 minutes with him. Your durability, I think, shocked a lot of people at this time. Like, your training regimen must have been insane.
Well, that was the thing. I think just growing up wrestling, to be honest with you, and I read every Dan Gable book and watched every documentary, probably 10 times, all of them. That I knew that I broke my arm in a kickboxing match as an amateur. I hit a guy with a spinning back fist and shattered my ulna on the guy's forehead. And it was a 5-round fight. And I did it in the first round. So I had to fight the rest of the fight with a broken arm. That was a Tom Latuli show, actually. And so I was exhausted. I got exhausted because I had a broken arm. I was a guy who didn't have a great left hand at the time. I didn't have a great jab and hook and uppercut with my lead hand. So I was right hand heavy, and my right arm was broken. So I couldn't do anything really in the fight. I lost a split decision, but I was gassed, and I never wanted to be tired again. And so everything that I did after that was just very, very extreme and endurance stuff, and ran a lot of hills, a lot of hill repeats, a lot of 5-minute rounds of 5 different exercises at breakneck speed, 1 minute break, and then 5 new exercises. And it was all kind of functional fitness type stuff. And I would do, I would do 7-mile run once a week. I would do a 3-mile run once a week. And I would do hill runs, stadium stairs, track sprints, a lot of that stuff. But I mean, at the time back then, through my UFC title run and all that, I was running probably, I think, it was always right around 16.5-minute 5Ks. So it's 5.5 minutes for 3 miles and stuff. So
this is an 8-man tournament, and Mikey Burnett hurts his hand. Chris Brennan technically is an alternate that gets moved into the tournament, and they're supposed to crown a champion during this event. But because there's no finals, they hold off and wait for obviously UFC Brazil to do so with you and Mikey Burnett.
Burnett didn't break his hand. He was gassed.
Really?
Yeah, he was gassed. He was collapsed in the back.
He had a tough fight with Eugenio Taddeo. I mean, for history, that's what happened on that end.
That fight was an absolute barn. That was nuts. That fight was insane.
Well, I mean, you're saying it's insane. You go 15 minutes with the silver medalist, another 9 minutes with Chris Brennan. You guys are both beat up at this point.
Not really. No, not really. I mean, I felt really good. It was just that ultimately, I don't know. You know what? Back then my endurance was, and I had found a product called Supercell. So I have black mold damage to my respiratory system from growing up in a house that flooded all the time when it rained. So my bedroom was in the basement, and we didn't know anything about black mold when I was little. So my entire childhood was spent in the basement of a dungeon that flooded every time it rained. So my respiratory system, like my high school wrestling coach would ask me, he's like, dude, stop smoking cigarettes. Like, I don't smoke cigarettes. I just can't breathe. And I found a product back then, that Supercell, that doesn't even exist anymore, that added 20% more oxygen at a cellular level. It was all natural, tons of antioxidants, and it healed my respiratory system. And then my body would uptake 20% more oxygen into the cells, which because of that, you're going to burn less lactic acid every time you train. So when you don't burn, or when you don't build up lactic acid, you don't wake up sore the next day. So it's like you didn't even work out. So then you can hit it harder the next day and harder the next day. And your endurance keeps getting better and better and better. So for me, like I said, that's why I was running 16.5-minute 5Ks. I was dunking a basketball back then. I was benching like 370, 375 at the time. And that it was because of that product. That one product is what allowed my respiratory system to heal up enough to where I could train that hard.
It's nuts, man. Now, Pat, you're doing a lot of tournaments. We've talked about a lot of tournaments. What do you think about that? I mean, as far as nowadays, nobody's doing tournaments anymore. Do you like that system, or do you think it's not a good way to do anymore? Do you like more of the Grand Prix type style, or what do you think?
I think anymore, Chris, it would be tough to do. I think it would be tough to do tournaments because certainly at the highest level, because, guys they're definitely going to get hurt. You're going to get hurt. It's just the way it is. So it's tough to get through those without injuries and stuff. And, how many alternates would you have to bring in? But so doing tournaments, 2 months apart in each round, awesome. But being able a lot, I don't know, it's guys, think about the K1 tournaments. Those guys were all banged up.
That means the problem is you don't get the best fighter at the end. It's the guy who gets damaged the least, and that's just the luck of the draw. So I agree. I just want to hear what your thought was on.
Yeah, no, but I would. I mean, if I was running a promotion, I would try and figure out a way to do tournaments.
Really?
Yeah, I would, but you'd probably have to do, one 5-minute round type thing, 5-minute round, and then, so they've gotten, 10 minutes of fighting in the first 2 rounds. By the time they get to the championship, then you can do a 3-rounder for the championship. Then that's, then you're under the 25.
Makes sense.
So the main event that night was Frank Shamrock versus Jeffrey Epstein's bodyguard, Igor Zinoviev. It's freaking wild. It's wild.
Yeah.
Didn't last long.
Slammed poor Igor on his head and knocked him out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
and who was it that wrote the article that put me like the center of the picture and Zinoviev off to the side and like alluded to me being the bodyguard of Epstein? Do you remember that article?
That's fantastic.
I didn't see that.
MMA, that can, I think they're a Canadian group or whatever. It's all, I don't know. I think it's MMA Comunista.
Ghislaine still hasn't been sentenced yet. I mean, this Omicron is very serious. So, but we're trying not to go down that road.
We won't. Yeah, we won't go down that road. But the funny part of all of that is, it's like, so Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty of trafficking trafficking children to who? Well, who? What? Okay, they sealed all the records, so we don't know who the pedophiles are now. Are you kidding me?
Hey, you know who's in charge of the whole case is James Comey's daughter. She's
sure was on the up and up. Okay, here.
Hey.
For the government officials watching this, I believe everything was fair. I don't know about Pat and Chris, but I truly believe that justice was served. And
here's what I believe.
Truth in the American way.
Here's what I believe. What I believe is there are still patriots within our government. That's what I believe.
I hope.
I hope. So you go through, okay, you get June 27th, you get Al Buck, Midwest Shoot Fighting. August 22nd, 1998, Extreme Challenge 20. Dan Severn comes to your hometown to fight you in a baseball stadium.
Yeah, that was fun. It was fun carrying Dan Severn around for 20 minutes. It was
Manny
awesome.
told us it was some shenanigans on Dan's side prior to that bout.
He had signed, I think, a pro wrestling thing or something, and so there was some concerns or whatever, and no big deal. No big deal.
Yeah.
We got paid. We went, Dan and I were equal partners with Monty on the gate and all of that stuff. So
That's a good.
Yeah, we made good money. And then when I fought, actually, dang it, what's his name? Clayton, Mike, do you got it there? Clayton.
Fuck, that's way down the line. Clayton, old school Midwest guy. He's fought like he's a 55 club veteran.
Andersen, Miller.
Clayton something. Fought in Ottumwa, Iowa. So my family's from Albia, Iowa. My aunt lived in Albia at the time. She had an Italian cattle rancher and railroad mogul. He had built an old Italian style mansion, and she lived there. It's a historic landmark down there. But I went down to paint her fence, her white fence around her yard. I told Monty, well, here's how it went. Monty calls me up and goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I go, "I'm doing all right. What's up?" He goes, "Man, I'm freaking out." He goes, my main event backed out down in Ottumwa against Clayton Miller.
Clayton Miller?
Yeah, Clayton Miller. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I go, "Really?" I go, "Well, that sucks." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Place is sold out too, man." He goes, "I'm gonna have to refund tickets and all this other stuff." And I go, "Well, I'll fight Clayton." And he goes, "Are you serious?" And I go, "Yeah, I'll come down and fight him." I go, "Yeah, whatever. I'll go down, stay at my aunt's. I'll drive over to Ottumwa, fight him, and then just drive back to my aunt's, spend the night, and then go home or whatever." And he's like, "Dude, that'd be incredible. It's awesome." I go, "One stipulation, 50-50 on the gate." And he's like, "Well, all right, because otherwise I'm just going to lose it all."
He had to say, I mean, what else? He had to say it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that was like, I think it was sold out like 3,000 people or whatever, and it was a good game, it was a good payday, and the fight I think lasted 30 seconds or whatever. But there was a huge brawl that broke out in that old Memorial Auditorium. It was it was pretty serious. It was a pretty serious brawl, and my mom was there. We had to take her back to the locker room and hide her in the locker room. So yes. I mean, that's how it almost didn't. Clayton and I, our main event fight almost didn't come off because things had gotten so out of control in the arena, but they eventually got it calmed down. And I think that was when that was right at the beginning of the MK Ultra meth introduction into friggin' society, right? Everybody was friggin' had rotten teeth and beating each other up and shit.
So, Pat, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but okay, October 16th, 1998, UFC Brazil. You and Mikey Burnett, you guys are on a collision course for the world title. However, there was a lot of rumors about you here in the Chicagoland area. Like your aura carried itself far beyond the state of Iowa. And the rumor was that you had a letter in your dresser drawer to yourself in regards to being a world champion. Is there any truth to that?
No, I had a 9mm pistol.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Whoa.
Do you want to explain that to everybody?
Yeah. When I decided I was going to become a world champion, I loaded a 9mm pistol and I put a round in the chamber and I put it underneath my socks. And I said, if I don't win a world title, I'm done living. I'm not living like this anymore because my life was shit. So I decided that's it. So I painted myself into a corner and said, I'm going to win a UFC title. That's what I did.
Right.
Man.
So October 16th, 1998, UFC Brazil. Sergio Bottarelli helps with the Brazilian television deal with the UFC. And you go in against Lion's Den product, Mikey Burnett.
The most boring fight in the UFC history.
I think that was me, but go ahead.
I don't even know why I didn't. I mean, I had really good boxing skills back then, so I don't even know why I didn't just go out and knock him out. But I think it was just there was something going into that fight where I just was trying to play it safe and make sure that I won on the scorecards and just like skate through it or whatever, you know. And we got into this mode of holding on to each other's shorts and all this other bullshit, and it was boring. It was horrible. I knew I was sitting there thinking to myself, this fight sucks. This is awful. But I just want to make sure I'm up on the cards, whatever.
Now, Pat, I would say, you know, the one fight I ever just said, I don't care what happens. I don't care how good it is. I just want to win this fight was probably my worst fight as well. And I just think there was a lot of pressure. Whoever won got a title fight worth St. Pierre and a bunch of money. I think anytime you put that kind of pressure on somebody, you don't get a good fight. You never see, look at every time they have like a UFC title elimination, whoever wins gets a title fight. Those fights suck. They're never good. You know, I think there's just something about that much pressure. It's very difficult to get a good fight out of it. I experienced it once and I was like, I'll never do it again. That's why every other time I got to that title fight elimination, I lost because I wasn't willing to play it safe. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Right. Yeah. No, and the fight that when I lost the title to Carlos Newton was the funnest fight I ever had.
Yeah.
I had a blast. We were just letting it all hang out and having a blast.
So Mikey Burnett's 4-1 coming out of Lion's Den. Your forethought going into this was, you know, wear him down, get his cardio down, and then just kind of let your training push forward. I mean, it was a hard fight. You're in Brazil. Neither of you guys had jet lag. To be honest, Pat, I just watched the fight today. I think Mikey's kind of responsible for the short grabbing. Like he kind of started it, but he couldn't really. I don't know. I mean, it's a hard fight.
Well, it was a retarded fight, number one. But no, but in the end, Mikey was so ungodly strong. I mean, he was not a giant of a guy, and he was benching well over 400 pounds and squatting 450 and all that crazy shit.
He squatted 600.
Yeah, so that's how strong he was, and he was solid. I mean, he was as solid as this table everywhere, and so he was legit stronger than shit. And he was I believe he was a Greco national champ as well. So I mean, he was a legit athlete, very very tough dude from Oklahoma. So it was. But the funniest thing is, what I remember most about that trip was that the next day before, I think we stayed an extra day in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and Mikey and I got in a cab and we shared the cab fare for like an hour driving all over Sao Paulo to tobacco shops to find a can of Copenhagen. We were looking for Copenhagen, and we actually finally found a couple cans of Copenhagen. And then on the plane flight back, it was all the Lions Den's guys and all of my guys on the same flight. We were back, you remember the big 747s or 767s or whatever, where the stewardess, what do they call them? Almost their offices were so big that we were all like taking turns on the ground, showing each other submissions and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then apparently our teams drank the plane dry of all of its alcohol.
Unbelievable.
I can see that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So that was a fun trip.
Wait, there's one more thing though. Now you mentioned it, so I don't want you to leave Brazil yet. But hold your horses. So Vitor Belfort fought Vanderlei Silva on this event, and the famous story is that Vitor had checked out of the hotel and checked himself into another hotel and had his mother renegotiate or try to renegotiate and hold him up for more money. And you mentioned that you helped him out or got involved in that. That Perretti was the matchmaker. Well, what was your role in that? What can you shed some light on that? What happened?
Somebody came to me in my locker room and said that Vitor's scared to death. He doesn't want to come out and fight. He's terrified of Vanderlei, which I was terrified of Vanderlei. Fuck, I'd be scared. Doesn't matter who you are. I mean, that was back when, Vanderlei's prime. And so I went up to, and Vitor, I'd already watched Vitor fight, which I just found him amazing. And I just went up and gave him a pep talk and basically said, dude, if I had your ability, there's not a fucking guy on the planet could beat me. There's nobody. There's absolutely nobody on the planet that could beat me. If I had your ability, I go, just go out and fuck him up. Just go out and finish him. Just, got him all pumped up, and he's like, yeah. Got up and then went out and ran Vitor or Vanderlei across the ring backwards and friggin' rifled him with a million shots and put him down. So, but that trip also, so I got promised by the referee, Mario Yamasaki. So Mario Yamasaki promises me, like, I don't know how many thousands of dollars. And back then, bad boy clothing was the shit, right?
Mm.
Bad boy shirts, bad boy dress
shirts, old school,
bad boy jeans, all kinds of clothing. They're going to give me thousands of dollars in this clothing. So anyway, I wear bad boy shorts out to the ring with the tap out logo between the eyes of the bad boys on the back of the shorts. And I was the first sponsored tap out athlete ever. And they bounced an $800 check to me. And, back in the early days, that's what they ended up making good on it, but they were hurting. They were hurting for money. They're selling clothes out of the friggin' back of a car, all that shit. And, but anyway, so I saw Mario Yamazaki at the hotel after the fight, and I go, all right, where's my clothing? And you said you were going to have it here. Frank Shamrock sitting in the lobby with the bad boy representative with 4 giant garbage bags full of bad boy clothes. It's the shit I was supposed to get. And so I was gonna kick the shit out of Mario Yamasaki on the spot. I decided I better not. And then they talked me into it again. And he did it to me again. So I dogged it. Every time I saw Mario Yamasaki after that, if I saw him today, I would give him shit because they did it to me twice.
You should.
I remember Tap Out got me too the first time I fought. They were like, man, we're going to give you $300. I didn't get it for about 3 years. Finally made good though. Finally, they were good. They were struggling, like you said. And then after that, they always took care of me, but they were always talking about, I'm going to get it to you. I promise, Chris. Times were tough, man. So, but even after they got it big, they always took care of me, man. They were good people at heart. It was tough at the time. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Pat, we started this conversation with, where you were mentally, and struggling. After this fight, did it feel like a gorilla got lifted off of your back?
I didn't, it was just kind of one of those things where it's like, I got through that fight sucked. It was boring. Whatever, time to move on. But, no, I just, no real monkey or anything like that. I mean, I felt like after the tournament, in New Orleans, when Mikey couldn't continue for a championship fight, I felt like I was already the UFC champ at 170 pounds anyway.
Yeah.
But go home with the belt. Did you take the bullet out of the 9mm? I mean,
what the fuck? That's pretty dark, man.
Yeah, okay, I did.
That's cool. Okay, good. That's a monkey. That's a little bit
or
of
at least
monkey.
Move it to your closet for home self-defense. Maybe away from the sack drawer.
Hey, so are you feeling like, things got to be pretty good right now? Not only you the UFC champ, but you guys are developed to one of the best coaches and just a great gym. I mean, you guys are starting to dominate. Are you really starting to feel like you're getting the love and the respect that you guys deserve? Because I thought back then everybody looked to you guys like, man, they're the shit out there. I mean, they really have it going on out there. Do you guys feel that love or not really?
No, because we were our sport was the black sheep of professional sports. I mean, all the athletic commissions were, it was the dark ages. A lot of places had us blacked out. I was doing televised debates with politicians to keep the sport legal in different states where they were trying to ban it. I did my homework before debates with these politicians to the point where I knew all the statistics in injuries and deaths and everything from auto racing to Little League baseball, everything. And, I would catch these politicians off guard. Obviously they're thinking they're debating a punch drunk fighter, just whatever. And so, I would would drag them into deep water and set traps for them, and let them talk about how somebody was going to die or get seriously crippled in one of these fights. And then I just open up on them and just say, if like Representative Bolin from the state of Illinois, I just said, and it was a live televised debate, and I just said, if Representative Bolin was concerned, or any of these politicians or any of these athletic commissions were concerned with safety of athletes, Little League baseball wouldn't be legal, where 7 kids die a year from line drives hitting them in the head, where football players die every year, spectators at auto racing events die, every year. I said, these guys don't care about anybody's safety. They only care that they're not getting their share of the money. And that's all this is about, is the money. And so, they, Representative Bolin, and the other politicians that I debated would ultimately just concede that I was right, that it wasn't about safety, that it was about money, and that's all they fucking cared about, and that's all they've ever cared about.
Well, all that being 100% true, but I just felt like I hadn't been, I started fighting in training in 1998, and to us, you guys were kind of the gold standard, you know what I mean? So we kind of thought you guys were good.
You lived during that time. So the only people that respected us, Chris, as far as you guys and us, just us in general as fighters.
Yeah, we all knew what you guys were.
No, but the only people that respected fighters in general in mixed martial arts or no holds barred were other professional athletes.
Agreed, 100%. Yeah.
They were the guys that would show up to our locker rooms, right? Like Mike Tyson came to our locker room. So Jens Pulver's defending his title, and a Nevada Athletic Commission guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, there's somebody at the door wanting to see if they could come in, but I have to get your permission as the coach." I go, "All right, well, I'll go to the door and see who it is." I open the door and it's Mike Tyson standing there, and I go, "Oh." and he looks at me and he goes, "Pat Miletich, you're a bad son of a bitch." And I go, "Holy shit, it's Mike Tyson."
Mike knows
and
who I am.
feel good.
And he goes,
feel good.
he goes, "A little evil here?" And I go, "Yeah." I go, "Come on in." So he's walking down the hallway to turn into the locker room. And right when he turns into the locker room, I'm right behind Tyson. And the look on Pulver's face was like he'd seen like the second coming. He's like, "Oh my God." Like, this is insane. And then, The Undertaker and Steve Austin and, guys like that would come to our locker room. We were just like, we went out. Michael Moore came to our locker room down in Miami and hung out with us. It was after he lost the title to Foreman. And so
he was a special fighter, man. He doesn't get as much credit as he deserves.
Yeah, he was a badass. And
the head case, but a badass.
We went out with Michael Moore in Miami, and we ended up at a club. And he goes, I'm meeting a friend at this club. So we get to the club and we walk up, and there's a guy with his head down on the bar sleeping. What's OJ Simpson?
Juice.
Oh, is this pre-Hertz commercials or post?
This is post. This is post knife expertise.
Yeah, that's where I was getting. So, Pat, you obviously had a kind of a magnet on your gyms, and you were dragging in like Bettendorf, Iowa, and Davenport are really, like Pat said, real small river towns with a chip on their shoulder, and you're dragging in guys from all over the world. I have to assume that some of the people that were visiting your gym just weren't able to acclimate to small town living. How many problems outside of the gym did you ever have to kind of, get involved in order to try to straighten things out?
It wasn't, I don't think it was outside acclimation to a small community. It was more trying to acclimate to a room that was always 95 degrees, and every guy that you grab is ranked in the top 10 in the world. You come from a gym where you might be one of the better guys or the best guy. You're a big fish in a small pond, and now every 5-minute go you have is worth a guy ranked in the top 10 in the world, and you're getting ground up and spit out. And those guys would, it happened all the time where a guy would walk over to his bag, he'd pick it up to walk out, he's done, like he's just leaving, like 30 minutes into practice, he's had enough. He's done, dehydrated, in misery. And everybody in the room would stop and go, you walk out that door, you're never coming back. And they'd make the decision. They'd either, some of them, a few of them set their bag down and stayed and took their beatings and stayed and got better. But most of them just turned around and walked out the door with their bag. So it wasn't anything to do with acclimating to small town. I mean, if they wanted to be a world champ or the best they could be, they were going to stay, and that's all there was to it. But those back then, when you get used to going with that many guys that are that good at the time, that's the norm. You're at a very high intensity level. Not strength and conditioning stuff and technique in the morning, but at night, fight speed training, all of that. It was if you were remotely out of shape, you were fucked. Like, you were fucked. You were in trouble. That was just the way it was. But the thing that I learned too is a funny story. I'll tell you a funny story. So Ben Rothwell, Rory Markham, and Mike Miletich are all there. One's from Pennsylvania, one's from Wisconsin, and Rory's from Chicago, south side of Chicago.
South side, yeah.
Yeah, and all three, just tough as nails. And they're on my IFL team, right? And so those three go to a bar in downtown Davenport. And when they're leaving, these girls are walking, and there's like 4 or 5 guys that are badgering these girls and touching them inappropriately. And so Ben Rothwell's like, hey guys, knock that shit off. And these guys are like, how'd you like it if we kicked the shit out of you? And Rothwell's like, they knew, I had made it clear, just, we're a professional athlete now. Don't be going around town beating up the locals. You can't do that shit. And so they knew, don't get in trouble. And they just, talked their way out of it. And they got in the vehicle. And so it's those three in the vehicle that's parked up against a brick wall. So they, the only way out is backwards. And so they're getting ready to leave, and the car full of these guys pulls up and traps their car in and gets out. They all get out. And so now they have no choice. So they get out.
God. This sounds like a horror story.
Yeah, it's a mistake, huh?
Yeah, it was a bad mistake for these guys.
I've made big mistakes, not this big.
Yeah, so these guys are, they're locals, gangbangers, whatever, and they all get severely injured. And the last 2 guys to go to sleep both got head kicked at the same time by Rothwell and Rory Markham. They spun. They had 2 guys up against cars, 2 separate cars, beating the shit out of them, and they both spun to look at each other. And then they did the finishing deed on the other guy's guy with head kicks and knocked them both out. Mike Miletich goes, it was freaking amazing. It looked like a movie scene.
Sounds like a movie, yeah.
Yeah, so they head kick these guys and put them to sleep. And so the cops show up, and the cops put all 3 of them in the back of one cruiser. And he's got this police officer he goes, okay. He goes, I got a guy from Wisconsin, I got a guy from Chicago, Illinois, and I got a guy from Pennsylvania. He goes, so you guys here training with Miletichrise? And all 3 of them said, because I talked to the cops about it, and they go, yes, sir. And they know they think they're in trouble, and so the cop goes, so how you guys want to spin this? You guys got attacked, you had to defend yourself. Is that basically what happened? And they're like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. They blocked us in, they attacked us, and we had to defend ourselves. And he's like, okay, that's the way it went down. He goes, I believe you guys. I know you're not supposed to be out causing trouble. Pat doesn't want you guys out beating people up and stuff. And so then Ben notices a cop walking around with one of them with a flashlight, looking around on the parking lot. And Rothwell says to the cop, he goes, officer, he goes, are they lying and saying that we had weapons or something? And he goes, no, Ben, they're looking for his teeth.
So, Pat, as a fellow south side of Chicago kid, Rory Markham's reputation for street fighting on the south side, which, I mean, it's very welcomed here. He was very well known being able to defend himself as well as, take care of his business.
Yeah, that boy could bang. I tell you, he could bang. That's for sure.
But it's cool just knowing that people have the respect for you. You tell them not to fight, and they know not to fight. You know what I mean? That's kind of You know, just a level of people.
Respect.
Exactly, man. It was like what Pat said, win. That's awesome. And that was always going like around the guys, a lot of your guys. I always felt like you were the big saving grace. Some guys might get a little bit, but they always, you were the calming, they couldn't get out of line because you were there. You know, it's pretty awesome.
Like the Godfather.
I learned the hard way, Chris. It was, because you know how it was. I'm sure there was a time in your life where you probably worked security at a nightclub.
Oh yeah, of course. All fighter had to at some point.
Right. So, being in, I don't know, I've probably been in around 300 street fights.
Ooh.
And so, but once I became a pro fighter, I stopped. I immediately just, because I wasn't in that atmosphere, right? Once you pull yourself out of that atmosphere, I was going to movies and dinner with my, girlfriend at the time, and just staying out of those places altogether. But one night I went out with the judo coach at my gym and Jens Pulver, myself, and I don't know who, maybe a couple other guys, but it was just me and the judo coach in line in a bathroom, a huge bathroom in a place called the District in Rock Island. And then there's like 20 urinals along the wall, a bunch of, shitters and stuff. And it's just, there's 30 guys along the back wall waiting for a urinal. And there's two guys at the urinals getting ready to fight each other. And all I did was say, I'm on the far wall waiting for a chance to take a leak. And I go, all I said was, you guys probably don't want to fight. You guys are going to roll around and there's piss all over the floor. You guys are going to roll around in piss. I go, why would you do that? And so this guy walks up to me and he goes, how about I beat your ass instead? And I said, look, man, I don't want to fight. And then the judo coach behind me says to the guy, he goes, apparently you don't know who you're talking to. And the guy looks at him and he goes, who am I talking to? And he goes, it's Pat Miletich. And he goes, no. Okay, I'll be right back. And he leaves and he goes out. And I looked at the coach and I go, Greg, keep your mouth shut. Just, you had no reason to say that. So anyway, I'm thinking to myself, nah, he's not coming. They're not coming back. So anyway, the judo coach taps me on the shoulder and he goes, watch out, here they come. So 4 guys come in and I'm backing up. And I know I've trained cops long enough at the time and all that, I don't want to fight. I got my hands up in the air and I'm going, guys, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. And I just keep backing up. And I get to where my back hits the wall. Now I can't back up anymore. And they keep coming. And so I rifle one with a 1-2 and drop him. And I drop the next 2. And then the 4th one backed off. And the bouncers come in and the cops come in and everybody in the bathroom is going, this guy was asking, basically begging. He didn't want to fight. So I wasn't in trouble. So let me go. They take these guys off in an ambulance, whatever. Well, 2 weeks later, a guy training at my gym goes, hey, man, he goes, one of those guys that you knocked out is filing a lawsuit against you. You caved in the side of his head and his eye fell behind his cheekbone. They had to reconstruct the side of his head. Oh. And so they said, he's filing a lawsuit against you and just, he's suing you for a ton of money. And so anyway, at the time I was training the MEG unit, which is Metropolitan Enforcement Group, which is federal drug task force of our area. And I would just volunteer my time to train those guys and stuff. A lot of law enforcement back then. And so, unbeknownst to me, I didn't even know, but what they had done, they were Latin Kings and they pulled the guy over that was suing me and said, if you follow through on this lawsuit with Miletich, we're going to make sure you end up in prison, dude. Like, you're gone.
Nice.
So, because they knew he was selling massive amounts of dope and stuff. So they just let him know. And so he dropped the lawsuit. But that was the lesson that I learned is, 1, I could have killed the guy. And 2, I could have lost everything I worked for, so that's why I was
shit bag.
Yeah, but I mean, what are you supposed to do if they're backing you into the corner like that? You always try to stop. Are you going to take an ass whooping for nothing? That's a tough one, man.
The lesson you take away from that is don't hang out in places where that shit's going to happen.
That's exactly right. Good point.
Well, here, that's a good segue. So, Pat, you've had some crazy athletes come through your gym, and some controversial. Lee Murray is one of them.
Ooh.
What was it like having Lee Murray in your gym, and how does that connection happen?
I can't remember exactly how he ended up. I think I got a phone call from Lee, and he asked if he could come over and train. I had no idea who he was, and I said, "Sure, you come over." And he brought a couple guys from England with him. Came over, very nice, very.
Mark Epstein, was Mark Epstein one of them?
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
Phil Norman. Okay.
But Lee was very, very polite, very yes sir, no sir, kind of guy, and every time he'd come over and train with us, he was like that every time. He did buy a set of china for my wife and I. We just gotten married, and he bought us a set of china for our wedding present. And my wife came from a very wealthy family in Montreal, Canada. I'm a guy that grew up, dirt poor, so I don't know the difference between glass plates and expensive china. But she looks at me and she goes, "What does he do for a living?" And I said, "I don't know." "Why?" And she goes, "This china's worth thousands and thousands of dollars. This is seriously expensive shit." And so anyway, I just, I never inquired. I didn't care.
I'm glad your wife knew.
Yeah, right. But
in your everyday dishes.
I got the first kind of inkling that Lee might be part of some nefarious stuff. Was we were in Japan, we were at Narita Airport, and there was this other English fighter who was on a the Shudo card that we went to see, and we saw him at the airport, and he goes, "Hey, Pat," he goes, "What do you think of Lee Murray?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "What's your thoughts on Lee Murray?" And I go, "I don't know, he's a really nice guy. I don't know, besides, he's just a nice guy." And he goes, "Yeah, he's a nice enough chap, but he's a bit of a gangster, don't you think?" And I go, "Dude, I live in America. He lives in England. I fucking don't know." So, but, ultimately, he after beating the shit out of Tito in the alley over there after that London UFC, and then I think a few other things happened. He lost his visa, his ability to come to America and fight. So he figured he'd do something, the next best thing, and pull off the biggest bank heist in world history.
Hey, so you were there. That is a pretty cool story. But you were there for the altercation between him and Tito, right?
Oh yeah.
I've heard different versions of this. Can you give us your version of what happened, or the truth, I should say?
Yeah, I'll give you the version.
Exactly.
So it was we got kicked out of the nightclub at 5 a.m. They turned all the lights on, and you got to remember, they took 2 bus loads of fighters and all their camp, their cornermen, which all of us are fighters. 2 great, giant tour buses full, dropped us off at the nightclub, gave us free booze and free food all night, and then at 5 a.m. turned all the lights on and said, "You got to leave." And we're now out in the alley. Everybody's out in the alley at 5 a.m. trying to figure out how the hell we're getting back to there's no buses to pick us up or anything. They just dropped us off. So anyway, one of Tito's buddies, Bo, jumped on my back and wrapped his arm around my neck like he was choking me. But he wasn't choking me. I could feel that. He was just horsing around. Well, Tony Frickland, one of my fighters, thought he was attacking me and ripped him off of my back. And I turn around, and those two are face to face right in front of me. And Tony goes, "What are you doing attacking my coach?" And Bo gets like, I wasn't like half of the word fucking out of his mouth. And Paul, one of Lee's buddies, big dude, blasts Bo in the head with a punch, launches him out into the alley, and his arm gets run over by a cab.
Damn.
And then instantly
He almost died.
Well, instantly the whole alley blows up into a brawl. And it's Tito and his guys against the British dudes. And Tony and I are just standing there. We're just like, what just happened? And so anyway, Tito comes running past me right in front of me, ripping his jacket off, and Lee's backing up, taking his jacket off. Their jackets hit the ground. Tito throws like 3 or 4 punches at Lee. Lee ducks all of them, gets out of the way of every single one of them, and then hits him with a perfect combo, drops him, and then starts kicking him in the head with steel-toed boots. Oh. And so I'm training Lee Murray at the time, but I'm also I was friends with Tito at the time. So I push Lee back and I say, stop, you're going to freaking kill him. I go, get out of here. And he's like, all right, Pat. So he and his buddies take off. Tony Fricklin and I help Tito to his feet. Tito doesn't know what's going on. He's kind of trying to wake up. Well, Tito then goes back to Dana White and tells him that he got jumped, that he and his guys got jumped by me and all of my guys and all the English guys. So Dana calls me screaming, freaking out on me. And I'm going, Tito's lying through his teeth, dude. What are you talking about? Well, Tony Fricklin loses his UFC contract because Tito lied.
Oh.
And then on top of that, Dana tells me, he goes, I've got surveillance footage from the alley coming. And he goes, I hope you're telling me the truth. And I go, make me a copy so I can show everybody what happened. Well, of course, I never got the copy.
Okay.
What I was saying was true.
All right. So let me kind of piece this together. So there was always rumors that a videotape existed of this incident, but nothing ever like came to the forefront. So it was video surveillance. I wonder if Dana and Tito had a very contentious relationship. I always wondered if they were holding that over Tito's head and it worked for leverage or, to embarrass him publicly, but it never got released.
If it exists, it's the holy grail of MMA.
Dana would have released it. Him and Tito hated each other.
If I could get my hands on that tape, do you know how much that'd be worth?
That'd be beautiful.
All right. One last thing out of me. Mark Coleman loses 3 in a row in the UFC, gets bounced out of there, enters into Pride, loses his first bout. I think it was a fixed fight, and gets into the Grand Prix and does his training camp with yourself. What was it like having Mark Coleman in the gym?
Very, very intense, very powerful guy. He called me up, said, would you train me for the Pride Grand Prix? It's an 8-man tournament. And I said, I'll train you, but you got to do what I tell you, or I'm not going to train you. You got to do all the running. You got to do all the endurance work. You got to do everything, or I'm not going to train you. And he goes, all right. So he did everything he was told. We got him in great shape, got him ready, worked on the fundamentals of stuff that, I felt that he really needed work on, and went over there fucking ready, man. It was crazy. It was a crazy experience. I had never seen anything like that, with the Tokyo Dome full of people like that. It's just, it's a spectacle that I don't think will ever be duplicated again in MMA. It was, I don't even know how many people were there, 60,000, 70,000. I don't know. Who knows? But it was waiting for Mark to go out and fight, and then watching Sakuraba and Hoyce fight for those 10-minute rounds. Of course, Hoyce had to have the endless 10-minute rounds and all that.
15-minute rounds, I think, wasn't it?
Something like that. Yeah, but
crazy.
It was it was cool to watch. But every time it looked like Sakuraba was going to finish him, we'd start warming up, and then Gracie survive and get to the end of the round, whatever.
It went an hour and a half, did it not? Wasn't it a 90-minute fight?
It was crazy, yeah. But it was Coleman getting just furious because we'd warm up and then just have to stop. So we warm up and have to stop, warm up and have to stop, and he was. But at the end when he beat Igor Vovchanchyn, because he was north-south on Igor and knees to the head were legal back then. And I said, just start dropping knees on him, man. And Mark started raining those knees down on Vovchanchyn's head. And Vovchanchyn was a guy that Vovchanchyn never, how Russians are. They're just very stoic. Vovchanchyn was screaming bloody murder. Like you could hear him, and he was terrified. Those knees coming down on him, he was freaking out. And he was losing his mind. He was like, I'm out of here, man. That's enough of this. So
did anybody at your gym ever get a takedown against Mark Coleman while he was up there?
Oh yeah. Steve Rusk and then Matt Hughes submitted Coleman a couple times.
Not submitted, a takedown.
Yeah, he took him down. Yeah.
Oh,
this is big news. This is breaking news. This is breaking news.
Steve Rusk Steve Rusk was a scary, scary guy. It's the scariest dude I ever trained. And, and Hughes in his prime was ridiculous.
And Hughes got a takedown against Mark Coleman.
My battery's at 2%. It's dying. I apologize. I'm just giving. Yes, he did. He did. So
oh my God.
Go ahead, Miguel. What do you got?
I just was going to close out because and everything we've talked about is proof that Miletich and the Miletich fighting systems were the big team. But UFC 16, 17, it was the Lions Den were the first one, and you guys transitioned into being that top spot. Did you ever feel a rivalry with those guys, the Lions Den?
Oh, yeah,
like
absolutely. So I'm going to keep talking. I'm going out to my truck to grab my charger because I got back from doing a seminar this weekend. So I'm walking out to my truck and I'll keep talking to you if I make it. Yeah, I still got 2% battery, but Ken Shamrock was screaming at me in the lobby of a hotel one time because he wanted a rematch for Mikey Burnett. And, why won't you give him a rematch? And I said, it's not up to me, Ken. It's up to John Perretti. Go talk to Perretti. I'll fight him. It doesn't matter to me. So yeah, there was definitely some heat between us. I respected those guys a lot though, very, very, very tough, legit camp. Right.
Right.
Well, there wasn't many of them back then. And like I said, I just want to, from our standpoint, always, you always didn't like the people at the top because you wanted to be them, but that was always you guys. So if there was ever any people, if there was ever any hatred coming your way, it was because you were the best in the world. Just amazing to me. You guys had so many champs and so many not in champs, but top level guys and just coming out of Iowa, a place in the Midwest. I know people I was with respect the hell out of you guys and just unbelievable. Thank you for what you did for the sport. I don't think you guys get enough credit for it, and you never will. But to the people like me and the people who were there, we knew who you were and we knew what you were about, man. It was everything. It was awesome.
He's dead. His phone's dead.
All right.
Hey, Chris, so locally in the Midwest region, guys would pretend to be Miletich Fighting Systems fighters. So they would be announced as MFS just to kind of get a mental advantage over somebody, and the crowd would pop. Just hearing the MFS name. Pat would send people to these events to punk these guys out in the locker room. Oh, that's well, funny. Maybe Pat didn't, but they would. Oh, I've seen it at least 3 times on the Midwest region. Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's cool. Well, looks like we're done here. I got to thank Pat for letting us talk to him that long. It was awesome just to hear from him, man. It was great.
Yeah, that was definitely a well worth a deep dive. Thank you very much, Pat Miletich. Much respect. And I remember Steve Rust. Well, Pat Miletich is in the books.
It's
another feather in our cap. I think we got another feather in our cap here because
that was a good one.
Yeah. I think he's a guy that has a social media presence, and so it's like you're not sure like if you're going to get a bunch of repeat stories or whatever. But I think what we did get is we got a pretty chill, mellow, like content Pat. Like he was laughing throughout and stuff like that. And that made me happy too. That made me happy.
Miguel,
I think we got his memory sparked.
The guy drove to 3 different venues and get fought 8 different times. Think about that. And I think that one of the surprising revelations, we'd always heard the rumor that if he wasn't going to be a world champion, he was going to kill himself. It wasn't something that he advertised, but people in the know who knew him that worked out with him, under their breath, they would tell people like, man, the guy went down a dark path. And, thank God for us, he got the title. But man, incredibly interesting interview. He was just brutally honest. I think we uncovered another layer of that onion of the Dan Severn worked fight. So we've got the promoter, Monty, talking about it. We've got one of the participants, Pat Miletich, and hopefully one day we get Dan Severn talking about all of his fixed fights. I think that would be the holy grail of interviews, Miguel.
I'd love to watch it. I don't know about participating.
I would even do it in person. You know what I mean? Like Dan Severn chokes me or whatever, dude. It is what it is. As long as I get to talk to him about his fake fights, I'm cool with it.
I'm sure that he can still hurt you. So I'm all for that. Yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, I'm all for it. I may fly him.
Sure. Would you say definitely?
Hey, Dan, how'd you like to go to Bourbon Street like on April 16th or whatever it is?
You know what? If I could advertise that he was going to be there to fuck me up, I mean, we might get 10, 15 extra seats filled. I'd be okay with that as well.
I would pay him to really fuck you up, and then I would say you did a work. So based on what I've heard, it's actually pretty cheap. Like you can get Dan to do something like that for about $500. Yeah, and when I tell him who it is, like his online tormentor, I might even get a deal on that. He might even give me a free autograph picture. I think I'm gonna have to part with the $500. I'm not gonna get it free, right? So I think, but I'm gonna ask for a picture for serving you up.
Would he forego the? I think he raised it. I think it's $15 a picture, autograph picture now. Do you think he'd forego that? For the opportunity to beat somebody up that has got absolutely no problem or qualms publicly talking about his pretend fights and remember. I mean, on the assessment that Freddie gave us, and Freddie's been, I think he's a pretty very, very, very credible source, right? Yeah. Is that Dan did it because he was kind of lazy, It's like, it's easier to not do a real fight. And if he had to do a real fight, he probably would have won anyway, but he didn't like to spend himself that way. Unless he got motivated, unless you questioned him or questioned his mentality. And then he wanted to be the baddest man on the planet. He still thinks he is. So, yeah, I think I can motivate him to hurt you bad. Well, and my counter to that is if he goes through all of the Travis Fulton turds that you interviewed, that he beat up multiple times. Yeah, those guys are also on Dan's record. So I would try to maybe convince him to go to a airport with me and take a flight to Costa Rica.
That's okay. If you want to come down here and you're going to try to get me here.
He doesn't fly either. He'd have to take a bus.
Yeah, we can wait for him you fly in, spend a couple of days here. And then
wait a week and a half for the bus to get there.
We meet him at the border. Now he might want to take his Buick. So I don't know. And anyway, this interview is actually about Pat Miletich, who did a work with Dan Severn.
I forgot.
And we are grateful to everybody for listening. Hit like, subscribe, and share, and do all that sort of stuff. And we are heading into a run of 3 or 4 really good interviews here. So keep your eyes out. Yeah. Trust me. If you're still listening, you're probably going to not miss any anyway. But yeah.
Episode 100 is right around the corner. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be episode 100, Miguel.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.